The Vraxian flagship Inevitable Dominance hovered above Earth, its crystalline hull refracting sunlight in patterns scientists below mistook for advanced cloaking technology. In reality, it was just how Vraxians decorated their warships: flashy, borderline tacky, but undeniably intimidating. Commander Drell stood on the observation deck, all four arms crossed in disapproval. 3 centuries of galactic conquest had made first contact routine for him. Science Officer Pex, report on these. Humans, Drell said, unhinging his jaw in a Vraxian yawn. Pex nervously tapped his data tablet. Fascinating species, Commander. Bipedal, fragile skeletal structure, but remarkable endurance. They appear to have enslaved portions of their population. Drell's central eye widened. Enslaved? Most species wait until we teach them proper subjugation techniques. Our observation drones captured images of humans with numerical sequences tattooed on their bodies, primarily arms. Classic identification markers. The screen displayed humans with various numbers: 26.2 on a runner's calf, 225 on a weightlifter's bicep, 07152022 on someone's forearm. And who controls these marked ones? Drell leaned forward, suddenly interested. That's peculiar, sir. The hierarchy isn't clear. Some marked ones appear to be authorities themselves. A complex caste system, then. Prepare the shuttle. I'll assess these humans personally. The first meeting between humanity and the Vraxian Empire took place at the United Nations. Captain Jack Reynolds, a former Marine with more tattoos than patience, represented Earth's military interests. Beside him sat Ambassador Elena Ortiz, whose diplomatic experience was matched only by her perfect poker face. Welcome to Earth, Elena began warmly. Explain your slave marking system, Drell interrupted, pointing at Jack's USMC tattoo. What labor division does this indicate? Jack blinked slowly. It's not a slave marking. It stands for United States Marine Corps. It's a professional affiliation. Pex scanned Jack. And the numerical sequence 0311. My Morse military occupational specialty. Infantry rifleman. Drell and Pex exchanged smugly knowing looks. So you admit it's a designation code, Drell said. And the female beside you, does she bear similar markings? Elena rolled up her sleeve to reveal 13.1 on her bicep. Half marathon. Personal achievement, not a designation. You voluntarily mark yourselves with performance metrics, Pex asked, mandibles twitching in confusion. Yeah, Jack said with a growing smirk. Some of us are proud of what we've accomplished. Pride in servitude, Drell noted into his recorder. Remarkable psychological conditioning. There's been a misunderstanding, Elena said carefully. Perhaps we should discuss cultural differences. There is no misunderstanding, Drell said firmly. We've observed your species extensively. The numerical markings facilities where you perform repetitive physical tasks until exhaustion, structured hierarchies. The Empire has seen similar systems on 1,000 worlds. You mean gyms? People choose to go there. Drell's laughter sounded like rocks in a blender. Of course they choose to. As the meeting adjourned, Pex whispered, should we classify them as pre-space enslavement culture? No, Drell replied, watching Jack and Elena leave. List them as regulated species with complex internal control systems and prepare a full cultural report. The Empire will be fascinated by how humans have normalized their own subjugation. When the galaxy's strongest empire discovered why humans tattoo numbers on their arms. Part 2. The misunderstanding escalates. 3 days after first contact, the Vraxians had established a temporary embassy in what had previously been a Planet Fitness in downtown Manhattan. The choice was deliberate. They wanted to study what they believed was a human conditioning facility up close. Miri, the Vraxian cultural attaché and the only delegation member with fewer than 3 centuries of imperial arrogance, was tasked with understanding human society. Unlike her superiors, she approached her assignment with genuine curiosity. Explain again, she said to Jack, who had been assigned as military liaison, why humans willingly marked themselves with these numbers. They watched people working out, many with visible tattoos. Because they mean something personally, Jack explained for what felt like the 1,000th time. See that guy with 300 on his shoulder? That's probably his max bench press. And this is good. For a civilian? Yeah, pretty decent. Miri's head tentacles curled in confusion. But why permanently mark your achievement? Does it not become obsolete when you achieve a higher number? Some people update them. Others keep the old ones as a reminder of the journey. Journey to what? Being better, I guess. Stronger. Faster. Whatever matters to them. Across the room, Commander Drell was interrogating Alina about marathon tattoos. Let me understand correctly, Drell said, all four arms now clasped behind his back in what Vraxians considered a power stance, but looked to humans like he badly needed a bathroom. Humans voluntarily run 26.2 miles. 42.195 kilometers, Alina corrected. An objectively unnecessary distance, often resulting in physical distress, and then permanently mark this achievement on their bodies. That's right. And this is not mandated by your governing authorities. God, no. It's a personal choice. A choice to suffer, and then commemorate that suffering. Drell's central eye narrowed. Your species is deeply concerning. Meanwhile, Pex examined the gym equipment with scientific fascination. These machines, he muttered, scanning a leg press. Designed specifically to create resistance against natural movement. Ingenious torture devices disguised as health tools. A nearby gym goer laughed. It's not torture, man. It's gains. Gains. Pex's translator struggled with the concept. Yeah, you know. Muscle. Strength. Looking good naked. Pex made a notation. Aesthetic modification through voluntary suffering. That evening, the Vraxians met to discuss their findings. They're clearly in denial about their social conditioning, Drell concluded. The numerical markings are so normalized they've created elaborate justifications. Sir Miri interjected, what if they're telling the truth? What if these really are just personal achievements? Cultural attaché Miri, Drell said with exaggerated patience. In 300 years serving the Empire, I've encountered 78 species with various forms of hierarchical control. Not once have I seen a truly voluntary system of physical subjugation. But the evidence is clear. These gyms are conditioning centers. The personal records are performance metrics for social stratification. The system keeps humans docile and focused on meaningless achievements rather than questioning authority. When Jack and Alina were informed of humanity's classification, their reactions differed considerably. This is a diplomatic disaster, Alina groaned. If they think we're already enslaved, they'll assume we're ripe for conquest. Jack cracked his knuckles. Maybe we should show them just how regulated humans really are. What are you thinking? Alina asked, recognizing the dangerous gleam in his eye. I'm thinking it's time these aliens experienced human culture firsthand, Jack grinned. Let's invite them to a CrossFit competition. The Vraxian Empire hadn't conquered half the known galaxy by being careless. Before committing to major diplomatic decisions, they believed in thorough intelligence gathering. This was how Kaz, a junior intelligence officer with the misfortune of being both competent and expendable, found himself disguised as a human and infiltrating Earth society. The disguise was, to put it generously, unconvincing. Vraxians stood 7 feet tall with 4 arms and tripodal legs. Kaz's human costume involved platform shoes, extremely baggy clothing, and a hat pulled low over his distinctly non-human face. Somehow, in the diverse melting pot of New York City, this worked better than it had any right to. The blend in Commander Drell had ordered. Discover the true purpose of their numerical markings. Confirm our suspicions. Kaz's first stop was a Brooklyn tattoo parlor, where he awkwardly slouched in the waiting area, pretending to read a magazine upside down while eavesdropping on conversations. A young woman was getting 1342 tattooed on her wrist. Is that time significant? The tattoo artist asked. It's when I finished my first 5K after chemo, she replied. 2 years cancer-free now. Kaz noted numbers commemorate survival milestones. Next was a muscular man getting 405 on his thigh. New deadlift PR, the artist asked. Yeah, finally broke 4 plates. Been chasing that since college. Kaz added achievement metrics possibly related to educational institutions. By day's end, Kaz had visited 3 tattoo parlors, 2 gyms, and a marathon registration event. His notes grew increasingly confused. Humans voluntarily subject themselves to physical strain. They appear to compete primarily against themselves. Numbers represent personal goals rather than external mandates. No clear evidence of centralized control system. When he reported back, Drell was displeased. You've been contaminated by their propaganda, Drell accused. They've convinced you their system is voluntary. Sir, I simply report what I observed, Kaz replied carefully. The humans genuinely seemed proud of their markings. Pride in one's place within a system is the most effective form of control, Drell countered. Tomorrow, infiltrate their military facilities. There you'll find the true nature of their numerical hierarchy. Meanwhile, Miri conducted her own investigation, taking a more direct approach by simply talking to humans about their tattoos. She met a retired soldier with fallen comrades' service numbers tattooed on his back, a cancer survivor with her remission date, and a mother with her children's birthdays. These numbers, she reported to Pex, aren't control mechanisms. They're stories. Stories. Pex looked up from his dissection of a Bowflex machine. Yes, each marking represents a significant moment, achievement, or person. They're memory aids, identity markers, chosen freely. Pex looked uncomfortable. That contradicts our working hypothesis. Perhaps our hypothesis is wrong, Miri suggested. The commander won't like that. The commander doesn't have to like facts for them to be true. On the third day, Jack decided to accelerate his plan. He invited Kaz, whose disguise he had immediately seen through, to observe a military training session. The Vraxian watched in horror as Marines performed grueling exercises while shouting encouragement. They do this willingly, Kaz asked, as a group completed their 20th pull-up. Every day, Jack confirmed. Some do even more in their free time. But why? Your species is not naturally athletic. Jack smiled. That's exactly why. We're not the strongest naturally, so we work for it. Kaz's report that evening was conflicted. Sir, I believe the humans may actually be telling the truth about their markings being voluntary. Their culture seems built around self-improvement through voluntary hardship. Drell dismissed this with a wave. Impossible. No sentient species chooses pain when comfort is available. Humans, apparently you want us to. What? Drell's central eye bulged in disbelief. To participate, Jack repeated slowly, as if talking to a particularly dense child. In a friendly CrossFit competition. Cultural exchange, you know? You think our tattoos and workouts are some control system, so come see for yourself. They stood in the repurposed Planet Fitness, now cluttered with Vraxian monitoring equipment and confused aliens trying to understand the purpose of kettlebells. This is beneath the dignity of the Vraxian Empire, Drell huffed, all four arms crossing simultaneously. Elena stepped in with her diplomat smile. Commander, surely the mighty Vraxians aren't intimidated by a simple human physical activity. It would be valuable research for your cultural report. Miri nodded enthusiastically. I volunteer to participate, Commander. As do I, Kaz added, having developed a grudging respect for human tenacity during his investigation. Drell's face membranes flushed purple with annoyance. Fine. Science Officer Pex and I will observe while you two participate in this human ritual. Jack's grin was downright predatory. Excellent. We start tomorrow at 06000. When the Vraxians arrived the next morning, they found a makeshift competition area set up with stations for various exercises. A small crowd of humans had gathered, some military, some civilians, all looking suspiciously eager. Today's workout is simple, Jack announced. For time, 100 jump rope skips, 80 air squats, 60 sit-ups, 40 push-ups, and 20 burpees. Best time gets their choice of protein shake flavor. Miri whispered to Kaz, What's a burpee? I don't know, but it sounds undignified. They would soon discover just how right that assessment was. The competition began, and despite their forearms and superior alien physiology, the Vraxians quickly found themselves struggling. Their tripodal leg structure made jump rope practically impossible. Their longer torsos made sit-ups a geometrical nightmare. And burpees? The sight of a 7-foot alien with 4 arms trying to perform a burpee drew tears of laughter from the human audience. This is... Barbaric Pex gasped from the sidelines, watching Kaz collapse after his 10th push-up. "This is Tuesday for these people," Jack replied, casually performing his own burpees at twice the alien's speed. Miri was faring slightly better, having studied human movements more carefully, but still struggled with the unfamiliar exercises. What surprised the humans was her determination. Where Kaz complained and considered quitting multiple times, Miri pushed through, her face membranes changing colors with exertion but her 3 eyes focused. Halfway through the workout, Drell could no longer contain himself. "This is preposterous. You expect us to believe humans voluntarily subject themselves to this torture?" A sweaty civilian nearby laughed between sit-ups. "Torture? This is just the warm-up, buddy." Warm-up. Drell's voice reached a pitch previously unrecorded in Vraxian vocalization. Elena smiled through her controlled breathing. "Some humans do this every day, Commander. Many do much more. But why?" "Because we can. Because we weren't born strong, so we make ourselves strong. Because the number you can lift today becomes the warm-up weight tomorrow." By the end, Miri had finished the workout last place among the participants, but finished nonetheless. Kaz had given up halfway through the burpees, claiming a diplomatic exemption from further cultural exchange. As Miri stood there, dripping with whatever Vraxians dripped when overexerted, a human handed her a protein shake and said, "Nice job." "First time." "First and last," she gasped, but there was something like pride in her 3 eyes. "Do," Kaz insisted. "They call it growth." The day after the CrossFit competition, the Vraxian embassy was unusually quiet. Commander Drell had confined himself to his quarters, dictating a revised cultural assessment that carefully avoided mentioning yesterday's humiliation. Kaz was receiving medical treatment for what the Vraxian physician diagnosed as voluntary muscle deterioration due to human influence. Only Miri and Pex were present in the main chamber, surrounded by holographic displays of human athletic events. "I still don't understand," Pex said, manipulating a 3D image of the Olympic weightlifting competition. "These humans are lifting weights that would crush their spines, solely to achieve numbers they then permanently mark on their bodies." Miri, who had been uncharacteristically thoughtful since completing the workout, nodded. "I believe I'm beginning to grasp their philosophy. It's not about the numbers themselves." "Then what is it about?" "Transcendence." Miri's head tentacles rippled with excitement. "Humans are physically weak compared to most galactic species. They know this. Instead of accepting biological limitations, they deliberately push against them." "That's irrational," Pex countered. "No species can exceed its biological parameters. Yet they continuously try." Miri brought up footage from a marathon. "Look at their faces. That's not the expression of slaves performing required tasks. That's determination." At that moment, Jack and Elena arrived for their scheduled diplomatic meeting. Jack was freshly showered but moving with the slight stiffness that came from a good workout. Elena carried what humans called coffee and what Vraxians classified as mild stimulant psychoactive brew. "How are our alien friends feeling today?" Jack asked with barely concealed amusement. "Ready for round 2. Pex's membranes paled. "There will be no round 2. The initial cultural experiment was sufficient." "Shame," Jack said. "Today was going to be leg day." Miri stepped forward. "I have questions, if you don't mind." "About the markings?" Elena nodded encouragingly. "Of course. Yesterday I completed the physical trial," Miri said. "By human standards, my performance was inadequate, yet several of your people congratulated me." "Because you finished," Jack explained. "That's what matters. Pushing through when it hurts. But I achieved no notable metric worth marking." "Actually," Elena interjected, checking her phone, "you did. You're the first Vraxian to ever complete a CrossFit workout. That's historic." Jack's eyes lit up with mischief. "You know what this means, right? You need to commemorate it." "Commemorate?" Miri's central eye blinked rapidly. "With a tattoo, of course," Jack said, as if it were the most obvious thing in the galaxy. 2 hours later, against all reasonable protocols for interspecies relations, and several direct orders from Commander Drell, Miri found herself in a Brooklyn tattoo shop. The artist, a woman named Dani covered in colorful sleeves, didn't even blink at being asked to work on alien skin. "First contact tattoo," Dani mused, preparing her equipment. That's definitely a first for me. Pex, who had accompanied Miri as the voice of scientific reason, was recording the entire procedure. The commander will have all our tentacles for this, he muttered. What number would be appropriate? Miri asked Jack and Alina, who had also tagged along. Your completion time, Jack suggested. 35:42. Is that good? Miri asked hesitantly. Alina smiled. It's not about good or bad. It's about marking the experience. As Dani began working on Miri's upper right arm, she had chosen this one as it was her dominant limb for data recording. The Vraxian cultural attaché experienced something unusual, a sense of connection with humans. The slight pain of the tattoo process seemed almost ritualistic, a shared experience across species. You know, Dani said conversationally as she worked, I've done numbers for all kinds of reasons. Birthdates, wedding anniversaries, the day someone beat cancer. All significant achievements, Miri noted. Not always achievements, Dani corrected. Sometimes just significant moments. The numbers are just coordinates for memories. Memory markers, Pex muttered, making notes. Not control codes at all. When the tattoo was complete, 35:42 in simple black numerals against Miri's purplish skin, she studied it with all three eyes. How do you feel? Alina asked. Altered, Miri replied honestly. But purposefully so. Jack nodded. That's the point. You're not the same person you were before yesterday. You pushed your limits. Now you carry that with you. The commander will never understand this, Pex said. Maybe not, Jack agreed. But now Miri does. Back at the Vraxian embassy, Commander Drell's reaction was predictably explosive. You allowed an irreversible modification to your physical form based on a human ritual, his voice echoed through the chamber. Have you lost all sense of imperial dignity? Miri stood straight, all four arms at attention. Sir, I believe I've made a significant cultural breakthrough. The numerical markings are indeed voluntary, and they serve a purpose we hadn't considered. Enlighten me, Drell said with dangerous calm. Humans are aware of their physical limitations, sir. The markings aren't about accomplishments as we understand them. They're about transcending limitations, about becoming more than their biology dictates. Drell circled Miri, staring at the fresh tattoo. And this helps them do that. It reminds them they've done it before, and can do it again. Miri hesitated. Sir, I would like to formally request a revision to our classification of human society. Pex nervously added, My observations support cultural attaché Miri's assessment, Commander. The humans aren't controlled by a system. They've created a culture of voluntary challenge. Drell was silent for a long moment, his central eye fixed on Miri's tattoo. In 3 centuries of imperial service, he finally said, I have never encountered a species that willingly marks itself with proof of its own suffering. Not suffering, Sir, Miri corrected gently. Growth. That evening, Jack and Alina received an unexpected call from the Vraxian embassy. The commander would like to schedule another cultural exchange, Pex said stiffly. He has requested information about your marathons. Alina raised an eyebrow. He wants to run a marathon. He wishes to observe. For now, Pex's face membrane twitched slightly. Also, he has requested data on the mathematical significance of the number 26.2. After the call ended, Jack turned to Alina with a grin. Well, I'll be damned. They're actually starting to get it. Let's not celebrate too soon, Alina cautioned. Understanding why we tattoo numbers on ourselves doesn't mean they understand humanity. No, Jack agreed, rolling up his sleeve to reveal his USMC tattoo. But it's a start. In her private quarters, Miri logged her final report of the day. Her last entry read, perhaps the most significant discovery about humans is not their strange affinity for numerical body markings, but what those markings represent, a species defined not by what they are, but by what they choose to become. She closed the log and touched her new tattoo, feeling a strange kinship with the fragile, determined bipeds of Earth. For the first time, she understood what Commander Drell could not. The numbers weren't about achievement at all. They were about possibility. The New York City Marathon isn't typically considered a venue for interstellar diplomacy. Yet there was Commander Drell, standing at the finish line in Central Park, watching with a mixture of disbelief and reluctant respect as thousands of humans staggered across, many collapsing immediately after. They do this. Voluntarily, he asked Elena for perhaps the 100th time that day. More than voluntarily, she replied. They pay for the privilege. Drell's central eye widened dramatically. Your species pays currency to endure this. Jack, who had been tracking various military colleagues running the race, nodded. And then they commemorate it with tattoos, t-shirts, bumper stickers, anything to remember the suffering. Fascinating, Pex muttered, scanning the finishers with his data tablet. Their core temperatures are elevated, stress hormones at peak levels, muscle tissue actively deteriorating, yet their facial expressions indicate satisfaction. Accomplishment, Elena corrected. They set a goal, worked toward it for months, and achieved it through sheer determination. Miri, whose status had been mysteriously elevated within the Vraxian delegation since her tattoo incident, studied the runners thoughtfully. They are not marking their achievement. They are marking their journey. Journey, Drell repeated the word, as if testing an alien concept. A peculiar perspective. As they observed, a woman crossed the finish line and immediately collapsed to her knees, weeping openly. Alarmed, Drell gestured toward her. That human appears damaged. Should we summon medical assistance? Those are tears of joy, Miri explained. She has overcome something personal, something beyond physical. Before Drell could respond, the woman was approached by what appeared to be her family. They embraced her, took photos, and helped her to her feet. On her calf was clearly visible a fresh tattoo 26.2. She branded herself before completing the challenge, Pex asked, confused. Jack laughed. Some people get the tattoo before the race. It's motivation. A promise to themselves. Remarkable, Drell said quietly. A physical commitment to a future achievement. The Vraxian delegation spent 3 more weeks on Earth, radically revising their assessment of human society. Miri led most of the cultural investigations, her own tattoo now a source of unexpected authority on human behavioral patterns. On their final day, a formal diplomatic meeting was held at the United Nations. Commander Drell stood before the assembled representatives, his posture notably less rigid than during first contact. After extensive observation and cultural exchange, Drell announced, the Vraxian Empire hereby reclassifies Earth as home to an unpredictably resilient species. This classification acknowledges humanity's unique approach to physical and mental limitations. Murmurs rippled through the human delegation. Furthermore, Drell continued, we recognize that the numerical and symbolic markings humans place on their bodies are not indicators of servitude or social stratification, but rather represent a cultural practice we have termed voluntary evolution documentation. Jack leaned toward Elena and whispered, did they just give tattoos a scientific name? Shh, she hushed him. This is actually going well. The Vraxian Empire proposes a treaty of mutual non-interference with Earth, Drell declared. We acknowledge that humanity's capacity for self-improvement through voluntary hardship represents a developmental path unfamiliar to our civilization. We wish to observe this path without disruption. After the formal proceedings, Drell approached Jack and Elena privately. I must confess, the commander said, lowering his voice, in 3 centuries of conquest, I have never recommended non-interference for any species. We appreciate the courtesy, Elena replied diplomatically. It is not courtesy, Drell corrected. It is pragmatism. A species that voluntarily subjects itself to hardship for the purpose of improvement is unpredictable. The Empire prefers predictable adversaries. Jack grinned. So basically we're too crazy to conquer. Your words. Not mine, Drell said. But his central eye crinkled in what might have been the Vraxian equivalent of amusement. Science Officer Pex has a final query before our departure, if you would indulge him. Pex stepped forward, datapad in hand. We've documented 1,247 types of numerical markings on humans, but one pattern eludes our understanding. He displayed an image on his screen, a series of digits that appeared to be coordinates. Elena studied it. Those look like latitude and longitude markings. Yes, Pex confirmed. Many humans mark specific geographical locations on their bodies. We cannot determine the significance. Jack laughed. Those are places that matter to them. Hometowns, where they fell in love, had life-changing experiences. You mark. Places Drell seemed genuinely baffled. We mark memories, Elena explained. The numbers are just how we find our way back to them. As the Vraxian ship prepared to depart Earth's orbit, Miri made one final log entry. Humans appear to use numerical markings not as a system of control, but as a system of liberation. Each marking represents a moment when they exceeded what they believed possible. The cumulative effect is a species constantly pushing beyond perceived limitations. Recommendation: continued observation from a safe distance. Commander Drell approved the log with a notation of his own. Agreed. Maintain non-interference protocol. These humans are best admired from afar. 5 years later. The Vraxian Central Council chamber fell silent as Elder Zox slammed all 4 of his fists on the table. This is an outrage, he bellowed, his ceremonial robes quivering with indignation. Cultural contamination of the highest order. On the display screen was an image that had the elders in various states of alarm. A young Vraxian military cadet with a small but distinct tattoo on his upper right arm. The numeral 42.195 was clearly visible against his purple skin. Explain yourself, Cadet Krill, Elder Zox demanded. The young Vraxian stood at attention. It represents the standard marathon distance in kilometers, Elder. I completed the course on the training moon in 6 hours and 17 minutes. And why would you permanently mark this achievement on your body? To remember that I am capable of more than my initial limitations, Elder. Commander Drell, recently promoted to the Council after his successful Earth mission, cleared his throat. If I may, Elder Zox, this practice has become increasingly common among younger Vraxians who study human culture. Study? Or emulate, Elder Zox growled. Perhaps both, Drell admitted. The human's approach to physical limitations has proven inspirational to some. Inspirational, another elder sputtered. The mighty Vraxian Empire does not need inspiration from a species that hasn't even colonized its own solar system. Miri, now cultural ambassador to Earth, spoke up. With respect, elders, the practice has shown some benefits. Cadets who adopt human-style physical training and commemoration have demonstrated a 23% increase in performance metrics and a 31% improvement in mission completion rates. The chamber erupted in overlapping arguments, with the traditionalist faction decrying human influence and the pragmatists pointing to the undeniable results. In the back of the chamber, Pex, now director of xenocultural studies, leaned toward Drell and whispered, "Do you think we made a mistake introducing human fitness culture to our youth?" Drell watched the passionate debate unfold, remembering the strange pride he'd felt when, against all Imperial protocol, he had completed his own 5K run last month. "No," he replied quietly, absently touching the small 5 tattooed under his uniform sleeve. "I think perhaps we finally found a worthy adversary, not in battle, but in ideas." On Earth, blissfully unaware of the cultural revolution they had sparked in the Vraxian Empire, Jack and Elena met for coffee near the old Planet Fitness that had briefly served as an alien embassy. "Heard from our purple friends lately?" Jack asked. Elena nodded. "Diplomatic channels are open. Apparently marathon participation is up 200% among young Vraxians." "No kidding?" "Next they'll be doing ultramarathons." "Actually," Elena said with a smile, "Ambassador Miri completed her first 50K last month, sent me this." She showed Jack her phone, a selfie of Miri, all 3 eyes gleaming with exhaustion and triumph, pointing proudly to a fresh tattoo 50K. Jack laughed. "Well, I'll be damned. Turns out the one thing stronger than the greatest empire in the galaxy is human stubbornness." "Not stubbornness," Elena corrected, echoing Miri's words from years ago. "Possibility." As they raised their coffee cups in a toast to interstellar fitness culture, somewhere in the vast expanse of space, a Vraxian commander was explaining to a baffled subordinate why humans voluntarily jumped into ice baths after exercise. The cultural exchange had only just begun,